couple that the perpetrator was definitely going back and trying to revisit this the way that he had placed her. So we're going into the next year, and even with these great profiles and new ideas to reorganize and reevaluate, they still had no leads. They had more of a motive now and a better profile, a psychological profile on what this person is like, but they still had no leads, and it was again still very upsetting to the community, and they kind of ran out of options. And ironically, maybe not so ironically, Ted Bundy had gotten a hold of them and wrote them a letter about the Riverman, is what he called the Green River Killer. And Keppel and the lead detective of the task force flew out to Florida, where Ted Bundy was incarcerated, and interviewed him. And one of the first questions that they had asked Ted was, do you think this person's going to come talk to the authority, as many serial killers do? And his response was, no, this man knows his stuff like any predator does. So again, right there, it fit in with a lot of the stuff with the profile that was created on this person. He clearly was a predator going after something that he had wanted, and then goes back to their daily routine and does not want to get caught. And that was just something that really stuck out to me, that he was a predator and he's gonna hide and then he's gonna hunt and he's gonna hide and he's gonna hunt. He also suggested that they should focus on the dump sites. He straight up said the dump sites are actually all you have, and it's really your own evidence. And the fact of the matter is, the dump sites are exactly where the killer is going. You know that that body and that killer are there at the same exact time. So then he suggested that they stake out a fresh body, if they were to find one, to not tell the media, and stake it out knowing that the offender is most likely going to come back. And then he also suggested that the Green River Killer was going back to these sites and continuously assaulting these women after they were dead. So this didn't do them an insane amount of good or find out new information. It more or less confirmed the things that they had already known, and as much as they had seemed like staking out this new body site was a good idea, most of the bodies that they had found were decomposed already, and it wasn't very likely that they were able to do that. So Ted really was just able to confirm some of the stuff that they had known about what type of killer this was. And his only suggestion for finding the killer was to stake out a body site, and they didn't really feel that they were going to be able to do that. More bodies were being found, more money was being spent. This case ultimately went cold. There were less and less investigators on this task force, and they truly were just at a dead road, and there was really nothing they can do. In 1986, we're at now, two of the investigators just decided to go back and go over some cases, and this was when they came across Gary Ridgway and first were able to start linking him to some of these murders. He was spotted multiple times with prostitutes that had ended up going missing by authorities, so he was in their system. And one of the way that they were able to link him to these murders ultimately in the end were from 3 different victims. One was a prostitute that got into a car or a truck with him, and the boyfriend was able to identify the truck, followed the truck, and followed it to the house. Then the female was never found again after that day. So when they told authorities, they were able to go to his house, knock on his door, and this is Gary Ridgway's residence, and question him about it. He claimed that he had not known her, and that was kind of the end of it. Then just a couple months later, 2 other girls go missing. They were also spotted getting into the same exact truck that Gary Ridgway had, and were able to identify that they were at that house as well. So then they were able to, I believe at this point, obtain a search warrant. They were able to like take him in for questioning, and they gave him a polygraph test, but he passed it, and there was actually no physical evidence. So yet again, there was nothing they were able to do. And in 1987, then they were able to go back and with that warrant obtain samples, bodily fluids from him. Then after 1987, everything went cold again, and it would not be all the way until 2001 that they were able to use DNA evidence to link Gary Ridgway to these murders. So a big reason why I think this investigation took as long as it did was because in the 80s they just didn't have the means to put all of this type of psychological profiling into effect to really narrow down who their suspects are. Truthfully, the only thing that they knew was that this person was hunting prostitutes and lived in the area, and I think they really just went off that this entire time. Even though they did have this really great profile on this person, it didn't really do them much justice. Once the 2000s came around and all of this new technology was implemented, they were able to link the DNA from the those 3 bodies that were found in August of '82 to Gary Ridgway's DNA, and were able to arrest him. And then again, through new science, there was paint found on 4 more victims, and it was the paint that he had used at work. And that was another way that they were able to link him. Had this technology been available years prior, I definitely believe this investigation wouldn't have gone on for 20 years, and they would have spent a lot less money. But it was the only thing that they had at the time, and I think that they did the best that they could, even though it is insanely unfortunate that this went on for over 20 years and they couldn't find him. A lot of the stuff in the profile created on him ended up being correct. He was obsessed with prostitutes, and he did have this anger towards them. He felt like he could kill them. He didn't feel like he had to pay for sex. They angered him. There's a lot of hatred there, and he felt also that he could pick them up, and he knew that they would not be reported missing for longer than your average report on a missing persons would be put in. So it gave him some more time to feel like he would get away with it, that they weren't important. He also displayed serial killer-like behaviors once he was incarcerated and being investigated, as he glorified what he was doing and felt pleasure in talking about the stuff that he had done again, and was basically reliving them. Then talking to females, ex-wives and ex-girlfriends, they also had found out that he did demand sex quite a bit, was aggressive, he did like having sex outside, and actually had asked to have sex with one of his girlfriends near one of the body sites. After authorities had detained him, a lot of them were able to put pieces together, realizing that they could have seen the signs that he was a murderer in some way, shape, or form, not necessarily the Green River Killer, but there was a lot of signs that had went unnoticed at the time that looking back on, they were able to wish that they were able to identify before. The profile also fit where he did say that he clustered them on purpose so that he could go back to these sites. He did admit to sleeping with these bodies, but his neighbors did say that he was very friendly, if not overly friendly, very neat. He loved to garden. So those types of mannerisms didn't completely fit in with the profile that was given originally. I think someone being neat and meticulous fits in somewhere else, but it did not specifically fit in here from my findings and just my research and what I'm going over. But overall, I think the psychology in this was in the investigative profile from the behavioral science unit that was very detailed and very telling on the history of what type of person would do this and their background and what they went through and where these angers had come from, and basically how all of these behaviors and personality types are created. So for me, reading about it, it is completely textbook when we're trying to learn about typologies and the different types of murders, whether they're organized or not, which way the investigator should go about it. If it's the, geographics and like looking at all of these plots of where these bodies are at and following the murders. There's just so many different things that I feel like are perfect examples for our textbook and really have definitely taught me a lot that hopefully I explain a little bit better in my paper. But I really did enjoy doing this project. It taught me a lot, and ultimately I do feel really sad that it took 20 years for them to catch him. It's quite disappointing, but it's definitely something that I'm sure they had all learned from, and thank God for technology, and thank you for listening.